let's start by looking at the layout of the desktop. What you see at the moment is the default layout when you have a file open. To the left is your toolbox, and it's, as I mentioned yesterday, in the CS3, it's a single linear column. If you click on this little tab right here, if you prefer to view it in the old way, in a double column, you can do so. It's just preference, nothing more, nothing less. Similarly, the palettes to the right, which add functionality to these tools, can be expanded or contracted, depending on how you prefer to see them. Now, they need to adjust this, so this is going to be 5. And by leaving it collapsed, if you use one palette at a time, and you click on one, it automatically expands. And then again, when you click on the little double arrow, it contracts. Also, for example, if I select the type tool and I wish to add some text, and as soon as I click, notice the top menu bar here, this one right here, that it gives me a lot of information about that tool and allows me to customize it. I can start by changing the color of the text from here. I can click here and I can do some custom colors. Or I can, right now, that's okay. But I can also change the colors from here. So it gives you a variety of different places to change colors. The color that you see here, and this little crossed out box, this, remember yesterday I mentioned that every shape you create has 2 features. It has a fill and it has a stroke. Well, even with text, the same holds true. You can add a stroke. If you want the type outline, you can change that here. So if I want this to be outlined from here, or if I can click down here, notice that this little checkbox, or this crossed out box, matches this one. It's the same thing. It stands for the stroke. If I bring up my colors here, notice this little box here that matches this box, that matches this box, I can change it from here. So if I want, a green stroke, or I want a red stroke, or a yellow stroke, when I add type, I can do so. I can determine how thick I want the stroke here. It's measured in points. And if I wish to add, I can click the up button, or I can click the down button. I can specify none, or I can come back again. Specify color. Now, by default, gives you a 1 pixel, or not 1 pixel, 1 point stroke. There are also some default settings here. You want a 1 point all the way up to 100 point. 100 point is a lot. That's over an inch. So that might be a bit much for small type. But 1 point is a good starting place. This little box here, for example, tells you what font you've chosen. By default, Myriad Pro is the font that's selected. Depending on how many fonts you have installed on your computer, that will determine what you see here. And this determines the font that you choose. So again, it's adding functionality to the tool that we've chosen, the type tool. So instead, if I want to use Palatino instead of Myriad Pro, it changes it here. And then depending on the font that you choose, you may or may not see additional options here from regular, italic, bold, italic. Some there are none, some there are even more options. Then this determines the type size here. By default, it's 10 point, which is small. It's the type size that you see for typically used for reading. But if I wanted to create a nice big bold headline, I could go up to 72, or I can type in my own. If I want 144 points, I can type in whatever size I want there. I can also specify the paragraph style. Do I want it flush left, ragged right? Do I want it center? Do I want it flush right? There are additional options that we have elsewhere that we can customize this, but this is done here. You can also, this is a new feature, you can add flash text. Anybody interested in web design, that would be something that could be very useful. For this class, it's not necessary. You can also determine the opacity from here as well. You want it to be opaque, you want it to be transparent, what do you want your type to be like? That can all be controlled from here, and it can also be controlled from the palettes over here as well. If you do not see the palettes that you want here, then they're typically found under the window menu. And you'll notice that the ones that are checked are the ones that are visible. There are also keystroke equivalents if you wish to bring them up as well. And that's what these are here like. So we have all our tools to the left, and we can control these. I can also pull the tools off if I decide. I can pull that off, and I can click here where it says AI Adobe Illustrator, and I can drag it over. And I can click like so, and I can put this wherever I want on my desktop. So you have that option as well. I can also move this to the right. You can move these wherever you want. But what they're trying to do, and I think they kind of go overboard a little bit, but just as everybody has a particular way they like to see their desks set up, that's what you're doing here. Because the desktop is a metaphor for a traditional desktop. So that's what they're trying to do. They're allowing you to customize it. You want to put it back, and click and drag, and you'll notice a little blue line appears, bar, and again, we have our options sit there. Now, there's another way we can customize our desktop too. We can go under Window, and we can go to Workspace. And you'll notice that there's Basic, Panel, and Type. We can also create our own custom workspaces. So if none of these work for you, we can create something totally different. So if I work a lot with type in a particular exercise, maybe I will set it to this and use that default one. And it will have all the panels. It mostly customizes the panels to the right. Tools remain the same, but the panels will typically change. And the tools, the panels that are used most often when you're using type are the ones that are visible. But let's say, for example, that, you know, the way I work, notice that color guide and color are tabbed on top of one another. And I really would like to see them separately. I don't want to have to tab back and forth. So if I want, I can click on the tab and I can pull it out. So, and if I want, I can pull it to the side. Notice how that bar attaches. So it's actually attached to the side here. So it's like a little magnet that you can pull apart and reattach just about in any configuration you want. If I want it to be completely separate, I can do so as well. I can click here in this part and leave it off. So maybe I want to leave that there. Maybe I'm a complete slob and I like putting this over here, and I like putting my paragraph down here. And maybe there's a couple of other windows that I want. I want maybe a line up. I like that one too. So I'm going to put a line down here. And this is the way I want my workspace to be. Every time I log in, I want it to look this way. Or I want to have access to this at any time in the future. So what I can do is I can go to Window, and I can go to Workspace, and I can say Save Workspace. And now I'll name it Perks Workspace. Okay, we're fine. Now, if I were to close out the application and I would reopen it, it goes to the last setting that you have. But remember, I can always go back to type. It sets it up to the original one. But then, say, I want my own custom workspace to be viewed. So I go to Window, Workspace, and you'll notice at the top it says Perks Workspace. So you can save as many different settings, you can have as many different settings as you like. And I go back, and it sets it up just the way I like it. These little tabs right here allow you to collapse the windows. See why I'm clicking? You'll have to tell me when you can't see. There are times when I even forget to turn on the projector. And hey, I can see this one. So this little button right here will just collapses and opens. If you want it to close it all together, You click on the little X and it removes it. There's also oftentimes added functionality that's hidden. This is the minimum that you see in this menu. But if I click right here, it'll say show options. And notice that there's additional functions that are hidden under there. Okay, so there's lots of little buttons here and there that add functionality. Okay. So let's go back to the type. Now you see the little flashing cursor, and I can click on your type. And you'll notice it doesn't look, you can't see it very well. If I were to zoom in just a little bit, you'll notice the light yellow outline. Like most things in Illustrator, most of what you do can be changed and changed and changed as much as you want. So when I'm done, and I don't want to change the type anymore, just click here, my selection tool, and you'll notice it's simply an object that I can move around just like any other. It's not editable at the moment. And when I move outside the text box and I click, it deselects it, so now I can move on to something else. So you're constantly selecting, deselecting, and you'll use either this tool, which is your selection tool, the black arrow, the white arrow, which is the direct selection tool, or the group selection tool, which is hidden underneath. I'm going to tear that off. Now, the next exercise will cover this in greater depth. If I wish to change the type, for example, and that can be true for just about anything that you do in here, go back to the text tool, click and highlight it, and then instead maybe I want to look at, now I put it away and I don't have it anymore. Let's go to Window, let's bring up our color panel, and instead maybe let's make it red outline. And I'm going to go ahead and change it. And on the fly, it's making a big bold stroke. So you can change color, you can change font, you can do whatever you want. Okay? And that's true for just about everything we do. Type is not unique in that regard. Illustrator has a nice feature, which is the undo. You can, and so let's start with some keystrokes. Some that you should commit to memory. There are at least a half a dozen that are pretty straightforward. And undo is your friend. You have by default about 10 undos. We can, if this were your computer at home, you could go in and change the settings so that you would have as many as maybe 200, I think is the top. But from my point of view, if you have to undo 200 times, start over. It's a bit much. 10 should be a good buffer. But you'll notice if I either go under Edit and select Undo Move, and that shows you the last thing that I did. To the right is the keystroke, which is Command, or it's the one with the apple on it on either side of your space bar. Okay. Or you can select from here, Undo Move. So it's easier just to leave your left or right hand by the keyboard and continue to hit Command Z. And before you know it, see, every move I made, every keystroke is gone, except for the last one. That's it. You'll notice it's just a little box that I can now move. Now, another useful feature for undoing as well is revert. And sometimes the F12, the way we have it set up, is in conflict with this. But if you select revert, what it does is it will, whatever you have done, it will revert to the last saved version. And this is available in Photoshop too, in most programs. So if you are in the habit of just doing the Command S, which is save, okay, it will only go back to that version. My recommendation is when you're working on a project, that when you get to a point and you're happy with it, and you think this is an interesting path that I've taken, and I'm really content with it, that you do, instead of just Command S or save or file, save, that you do a save as instead. Save as is different because it prompts you and it says, what do you want to name this and where do you want to save it? So if I name this, which is lesson 1 start, and I name it 01, and I typically get in the habit of naming them sequentially so that I can go back in time any time I want, and I can go back to version 1, 2, 5, 7. I could have as many 20 or 30. And that doesn't mean that there are a number of features inside each one that I can undo, and I can probably go back, but there may be times when it's too difficult, that you've made some revisions to your project, it would take too long to try to reconfigure it to make it look like it did 10 versions ago. So if you have that version saved, you can always open it back up. And if you want to name it something different, version with tree, version with bush, version whatever, then that might be helpful. And you can always jump back to those points in time and keep them as separate documents. And then when you're done, and your document is finalized, you may choose to save some of those, or to clear out your hard drive, you may choose to go back and just delete a whole bunch of those. But if you, and I think it is a mistake, for some things it's not a big deal, but for a big project, if you just continually hit Command S, which is a good habit to get into, that you're constantly saving because it doesn't automatically save. So if your computer shuts down or something fails, you will only lose what you haven't saved. So if you're progressing along with an exercise, hit Command S, Command S, Command S, and it constantly saves it, saves it, saves it. But for a project that you're working on that can go in multiple directions, then maybe use the save as and save it periodically in different versions so you can go back. It's a suggestion. You don't have to do it, but I think you'll be happy with it, especially when your flash drive crashes or your hard drive, or you lose a file or something, you're in good shape. Now, is there anyone who does not know when you're, after you've opened the file or after you have created a new file, how to save on the Mac or where to save? No? Okay. So I have save as. This is what if you were starting with a brand new document, let's just do it. Brand new document, file, new. I can title it here, and we'll call it test. This is our test document, test document. Profile is custom. In this class, I mentioned yesterday, we're going to work mostly for print. The size refers to the paper size. You can make the paper size whatever you want. In this class, letter size should be ample. We may use tabloid size from time to time, which is 11 by 17. Letter size 8.5 by 11. I like measuring in inches, so I'll switch from points to inches. Type in ruled lines, I do measure in points. But there are other places we can go to switch this at any time we want. And then you determine the orientation of your document. Do you want it vertical or portrait, or do you want it horizontal, also called landscape? These can all be changed. You can change them at any time you want. But it's a good habit to get into, to have some planning, think about what you're going to do. So a lot of these are pretty straightforward. You may want to change the vertical or horizontal later on, but you'll know pretty much ahead of time that we're working 8.5 by 11 letter size in our file. You can always change it later on. Now I click OK, and it opens the document. Okay, and you'll notice it's horizontal. I can zoom out. And what you see here, it's important to understand what you see. You'll notice a little black line. This is the printable area. This is your paper size. Everything around the paper is a part of your file, but it does not print. So, again, I mentioned if I make a little box here, and let's fill it. Fill it with red. Now, if I were to choose to save this file, this is a part of my file, but it will not print. So to save the file, and you need to do this from the start, is to do a save as, not a save, because you're not going to know where it's going to save. So start by going to File, Save As, or Shift-Command-S is the keystroke equivalent. Oftentimes, the only difference between the PC and the Mac, there are not many differences, but it's oftentimes instead of the Command key, it's the Control key. And when they talk about the Alt key, on the Mac it's the Option key. And in fact, they are the one and the same key. So the only difference will be between the Mac and the PC with regard to keystrokes, oftentimes, is Control versus Command. Command key on the Mac is the one with Apple. Control key, there is a Control key on the Mac, but it's not used. So now I'm ready to save it, and you're going to need a flash drive if you're going to work with it. You know what those are? Little flash drive, thumb drive, they're called a variety of things.
A certain memory size?
Whatever you can afford. For $10, $12, you can get quite a bit these days. And that should be ample. Now, I do not have one in my computer at the moment, but if I click on this little button right here, see where my mouse is, it opens that up. And that's a good thing. I can click on the lower right-hand corner and stretch this out. Now, this is where you don't want to save this, but this is what I'm going to save. And that is the desktop. If you're working at home, and believe me, my desktop is a mess. It has files everywhere. And then periodically I can't stand it and I clean it all up. You can save them. But what happens on the computers here, if you save them here, is they have a program called Deep Freeze installed. And what that does is every time you log out of the computer, it resets it to a configuration that people in computer services have determined to be the default setting. So all of your files disappear. They go away. They will not be there. That's why you need a flash drive. Or if you forget it, then you burn it on a CD and archive it there, and you take it with you as part of, your format. But you have a .Mac account, you can save it there. If you had access to these folders, maybe you could have a document folder on your own personal computer, you could save it, something in there. If you had your thumb drive, you would see it right here below the items. And you would click on that and then save it. If you need to add folders, you can do that from here. I'm going to go ahead and click on the desktop, and I'll add a folder, and I'll put part 186 demos. Create. Okay, so that's my folder, and I'll save it in. Save. Now you have the option of doing save as again, or just Command S for save. When you do save, it replaces the old with the new. When you do save as, it will now save it as a separate file, unless you name it the same, and it will prompt you and say, "Or do you really want to replace the old one?" And if you say yes, then it will replace the old one.
Just a question on the workspace for the paper files. Say like when you're importing a picture or something like that, and for some reason, for example, with me, I imported a picture and on the screen I noticed that the whole picture actually kind of flares out beyond the border space for the paper. Is there any way to resize that to fit in?
Resize the picture or resize
the picture itself is larger than the work.
But which do you want to resize? You can resize either one.
Oh, can you?
You can.
How would you do either one?
Okay. Let's start by importing a picture. So go File, Place. place is equivalent to import. And that pertains to bringing in a foreign document. And that means any document that is not an AI or Adobe Illustrator document needs to be imported. And you can't import an Illustrator document into an Illustrator document. You can transfer files back and forth or images, but you can't import one into another or place one into another. So I will go into the hard drive. I'll go to applications because I know where some photographs are. They happen to be in Photoshop. And I'm going to look in samples. And I'm going to look at, let's bring in the fish photograph. So here's a fish photograph, and I'll place it. And it says the photo duct has greater than 8 bit. Imported, that's okay. I want 8 bit is just fine. So this is the size I have. I do not recommend enlarging it, when I talked about that the other day, because it's a bitmap, and all you're doing is enlarging the bits. While it's selected, you'll notice that it's defined by this blue bounding box. There are blue lines that stretch diagonally, and there are little handles in the corner. To resize this, again, there are multiple ways I can do it. The easiest way to do that is through mouse and keystrokes. Now here's an important keystroke to remember. When you're resizing something, and it doesn't matter whether it's a shape or a photograph, and it doesn't matter what program you're using, on a Mac or a PC, to constrain the movement or to constrain the proportions, and that's the keyword, proportions, you hold down the Shift key. Now, when I drag from any of the corners, notice that it doesn't matter where I move my mouse, that the height and width, the ratio to one another, are locked together. However, if I begin to move from side or top, or even diagonally, notice how I can change that, and it distorts it. And if you're not careful, especially when you see people in that, they look really strange, compressed, flat. So that's another important keystroke. So we have Command S for save, Shift Command S for save as. If you want to know how to open a file, Command O, open. Command Z, what is Command Z? That's your friend.
Undo.
Undo. Really important. To constrain proportions when you're, see, now I goofed it up. Command Z, undo. That brings me back a couple of steps. So if you don't panic, most things can be easily solved. If you forget. And it's easy when you're doing this. So the other question was, well, I want to change the paper size. Does that adequately answer the question, or more? Or?
I was concerned about the proportion, like you said, and make sure that everything was accurate. I just wanted to refit it because I noticed, I don't know if I didn't pay attention to the prompts or what, but I was looking at it the other day and I noticed that the picture itself extends beyond the paper borders.
Well, part of it is in the initial setup. It asked for bitmap images, what do you want the resolution to be? And if it's set to 72 and your image is 300, it might enlarge it and blow it up. Or it could convert it. I don't think it would convert it. I think it would just enlarge it.
It was from a Corel 10 painter file. I don't know if the default TIFF or TIFF.
Okay. It will, back in the day, Illustrator was very limited in the type of files you could place. It now accepts almost every file. I'll say almost. Original Photoshop files, TIFFs, PICs, JPEGs, you name it, you can bring them in. SWF files, which are sharply flash. To change the paper size, we go to File, and we go to document setup. And you'll notice we have the width and the height in inches. So if you have a custom paper size that you're working with, most papers come in standard sizes though. So even if you have a small image, the likelihood of you wanting to print on a teeny tiny piece of paper doesn't make sense. You want to print it on an 8.5 by 11 and then trim it if that's your goal. If it's for press, if you're working eventually to be set for offset lithography, then that's a different issue altogether, and you're going to set it up differently with the crop marks and all that sort of thing when you save it for them. Even if it's a small image, it's going to be ganged up, because they're not going to print one at a time and print 3,000. They might print, 1,000 or 100 on one sheet of paper, and then they come back and trim it. Just go back and you can change it to a custom size here, or I can go back and if I want tabloid, I'll click here and leave it horizontal. Notice it's got more. That is something that is unique with computers, that when you're done and you decide that you want a different size paper, you can change it. When you're working in traditional media, that doesn't work. If you do a watercolor thing and you decide, wow, I really should have used a larger piece of paper, too late, that'll change a little bit. Not so in computers, which is really pretty nifty. Okay. Again, Command Z, I can bring it back. Something I didn't mention yesterday, but let's look here. Here's some more of the tool. A little bit, you'll notice down here, if you want to move back and forth, you have your sliders. That's, I find, a very inefficient way to work. It's easier to use the hand, but what is even more efficient is to use the keyboard equivalent, which is to put your hand on the space bar, and wherever you are, it doesn't matter what tool you have selected, it turns into the hand tool. And this is true for Photoshop as well. It's true for many programs. Hold down the space bar and click and drag, and when you click, notice it turns into a fist. You're grabbing it, and when you drag, it moves it around. You can also change the size that you view the document. This isn't necessarily what the print size is, but the size that you're viewing it from here. Right now, we're viewing it at 100%. So that is the print size. But you can either click and drag and highlight this, and if I want to view it at 25%, oops, I didn't want to do that. There we go. I'm looking at it at 25%. I can also click and hold down, and there are some default settings that I can use. If I want to fit the screen, I can do that. So, similar to Photoshop, it's not exactly the same rules, but so that you remember what size you're working with, I typically like to have rulers up at all times. And you'll notice there are no rulers at the moment. They're invisible. Here's another useful keystroke. Command R. Command R. And you'll notice it brings up the rulers. We have rulers along the top, and we have rulers along the side. Now I can see, oh, this is 11 inches wide. And when you zoom in, notice that the ruler gets even more detailed. But when I zoom way in, notice from here to here is an inch. And I keep zooming in, and you can measure it really precise. Oh. Okay, so how do you zoom in? How do you zoom out? Because when you're working in the real world, you have a fixed size. And one of the advantages working in computers is that you can zoom in and look at things from a magnified view and really, fiddle with things and fuss with them at a very detailed level. But then you also need to be able to zoom out and get the big picture. A variety of ways that you can do this. I'm going to first show you the undesirable ways, and then I'll slow down to the keystrokes that I think are useful. You can use the magnifying tool. And you'll notice that when you select it, there's a plus sign inside the magnifying tool. That means that wherever you click, let me put something here so you can see what we have. So with the magnifying tool, if I want to zoom in on this corner, if I move to that corner and I click, notice that that zooms in. It's now 600%, and wherever I click is at the center of my screen. If I click here in the center, or maybe on the right, it zooms in again, and now this becomes the center. So if you wonder why it's jumping around, it depends on where you click. If I want a specific area to zoom in on that, I can click and drag and rubber band in this area. And now that entire area will fill the screen. That's one way. If I want to zoom out with the zoom tool, you hold down the Option key or Alt key, and that turns into a minus sign, and now you can gradually zoom out. Very inefficient way to work. But, you know, if you can't remember, it's there. Use it. The tool is there. Another way is to go to View, and you can zoom in and zoom out from here. Notice the keystrokes to the right. These are pretty easy to remember. Command plus and Command minus. So here's another way to zoom in and zoom out. Zoom in, and hitting the command and the plus, and hitting the command and the minus. Also, if you want to fit the window, it's Command 0. Actual size is Command 1. So if I want actual size, Command 1, boom, it takes me back.
Is that different in Photoshop?
It's pretty darn close to being the same. And most programs are these days, because most of them are owned by Adobe, are almost identical.
What was that? Command 1 again brings back the original size?
The actual size. Now there's another way we can zoom in and zoom out. I told you there's always going to be 3, 4 different ways of doing things. If you hold down, it doesn't matter what tool you're on, you hold down the Command key and the space bar. Wait a minute, has it changed? No, it's these two. There we go. Command key and the space bar turns into the magnifying key. So now if I click here, it zooms in. If I hold down the space bar, the Command key, and the Alt key, it turns into the zoom out tool. If you can just remember Command plus, Command minus, you're set. That helps a lot. And the more you use it, and also hold, you know, to move the hand around, hold down the space bar. That will help a whole lot. And the more you use it, you're going to get tired of zooming in and zoom out, and you're going to remember to hit Command space bar to zoom in, and Command space bar and Alt key to zoom out. Oops, didn't want to do that, because there are some glitches here. I think I've got some other here. I think there's another keystroke on this conflicting. So I typically, even though I'm left-handed, I use my mouse in my right hand, and I keep my left hand by the keyboard, and there's a few basic keystrokes that I use a lot, especially for zooming in and out, things like that. There is also, here under the Open, the menu next to the signs, we can show a variety of things: version, queue status, current tool, date and time. The one that I think is useful is the number of undos that you have available to you. And you'll notice that there's 10 unviews available to us. I think that's pretty helpful. Everybody see where that's at? Here. Show number of unviews. Any questions so far? I'm sure there are. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Am I okay pace? On another day, I will talk about the bridge, and it can be a very useful tool. It's this little button in the upper right-hand corner. And it's, for those of you who have used Photoshop, it's really the same tool. And it's a great way for previewing images without having to open them. It's very nice. If I click here, it should launch it. It's actually an ancillary program. The bridge will launch. And now you can go to your computer and click in here. I can go to applications, for example, and let's look inside Adobe Illustrator. Remember the files that I showed you the other day? Whoops, didn't want to go. I want. Oh, Mr. Bill. Cool extras, sample files, sample art, and look at here. All of these, they'll pop up in a minute. All of, without having to open them, I can see all of my files in little thumbnails. I can also move this over like so. And I can click on these, and notice how it shows up here. And I can move this window down, so I can get a nice preview of this without having to open it. And I can select any of these. So this is a useful way when you're doing your exercises and you're done, and you have a handful of them that you want to show me, for me to check them off. Just go to Bridge. Go to the folder where you have them saved. We look at them, enlarge them. I look at them, and we look at the next one, so on and so forth. And if you want to open it from here, you can just double click on the file and it will launch. When you find the one that you want. As I said, we'll talk more about this later because there's all kinds of metadata and there's keywords for organizing your files and stuff. Just more information than you want to know about your work. It can be very useful. Okay? So that is the bridge. Let's do that. There are different ways that you can view documents. Notice that I have, you can see back of my desktop, you can see here's one file, here's another file, and sometimes that can get annoying. That you just want to focus on one file, one alone. How to fix that is that you'll notice down at the bottom here, we can change it to screen mode. And notice that there's a keystroke equivalent, Shift F. And if I click here, here's the standard. We can select maximize. Notice it maximizes, and when it does that, I don't see the other file anymore. I only see a gray background. When color is important to you, sometimes you don't want to see whatever color of your monitor that you have in your desktop. And this is true for Photoshop too. I can say full screen mode with menu bar, and I can say full screen mode. And if you want all of your tools to temporarily disappear, you hit the Tab key, and that goes away. So if you accidentally hit the Tab key and you say, what happened to all of my tools and palette? That's what happened. You hit the Tab key again, and it brings them out. So these are different ways that you can view the screen. Is standard screen for the most of the time is pretty helpful. I mean, it's useful because when you have multiple files open, sometimes you want to share elements of a document with another. You know, once you've already created one, why do you want to create it again? You just, I want to use it over here. And instead of using the old copy-paste technique, all I have to do is, for example, if I select one or both of these boxes, or I can select this photograph, all I have to do is use the move tool or the selection tool, click on it, and I can drag it over to the other document. And now I've made that part of the document, same as Photoshop. It's that simple. So you can swap parts of images around. Okay? So, again, yeah, go ahead.
Up on that fish image you have up there, how do you get rid of all those little,
I'm sorry, one,
on the image you have on the top of the fish, you have all those move squares around, how do you get rid of those, like right now? You know what-
these squares,
Yeah,
when you select,
I see.
as soon as you select it, it brings it up.
I know you bring it up, but now you want to get rid of it, just reselect it, reselect
How do you get rid of it?
it. How do you get rid of it?
You just
You don't
click
wanna see- You don't
outside
want to
it.
see it at all.
Yeah,
You either deselect it,
oh, okay.
or if you want this locked, you can always lock it. You also can go to View, and you can say Hide Edges, and then you can go to View, and you can say Hide Bounding Box, and then that goes away. It's still selected, you just don't see it, and I don't like that, because then you wonder why other things are not working the way they're supposed to be. But sometimes you want something selected and you're making a very precise alignment or something, position in it. And the little squares, the little anchor points, or the lines surrounding the image are getting in the way. So it is useful at that point, go ahead and I can never remember, I don't use it that much, to remember the key commands for that. In some cases there aren't any. So I'll say show bounding box, and then I'll go back, and we'll go back to View, and we'll say show edges. Again, if you don't see a tool over here or a palette, go to Window, and this has all of them here. And you just select it, and it pops up. So if there's something that you want to see that isn't being seen, or something you want to hide, then you typically go to View. If I want to see this document in outline, like so. So I'm just looking at it in terms of shapes and not colors or anything, or maybe positioning or that sort of thing. Guides are a good example. If you want to show guides, hide guides, lock guides, you know, things that are just visible or invisible. Again, add functionality. And if you want, there's more key commands to remember. Yep. Are we ready to move on to lesson 2? I've covered some, and some of this you'll have to go over on your own in lesson 1. And it's mostly feeling comfortable doing pretty much what we did. We're going to go on to selecting and aligning items and things like that, so that you feel comfortable moving documents around, with parts of pieces and things like that, and putting it all together. You guys feel like you need a break, 5-minute break? Or, okay, 5 minutes. We'll be back by 10 after, and we'll move on to lesson 2.
And then you trace it down to like 6 colors. How do you select like one color so you can change it?
It's part of a group, so you need to use the group selection tool.
So the wand? When I use
No.
the wand,
That was select.
you never do it?
I'll show you real quick. It was on track.
See, like, I want to get like all the colors. So I can change all the browns to one color. You see how this is same way as this? Like you do this, you can change all of this.
That's why sometimes.
You might have to select expand, and then when you expand it, then you can use the group selection tool.
You
And
did
it's so- It is expanded.
You already did. You had already expanded.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
You have the group.
That's what because I was using it at home on this here. But
Huh. That's weird. Okay, let's say
You
object.
expanded again, because he went to expand the parents. So they need to.
so there's no way you can like use
Oh, I guess if you.
code.
Yeah.
That's what you did
Oh,
yesterday.
yeah, no. We'll get to that in a future exercise. Because I can select this and then I can go to select.
Oh, the same color, right?
Same
Fill
fill color.
Oh,
There you go.
that's cool. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And
All right, that was under.
are you going to select?
Select,
and then
save,
same fill color?
color.
Okay so far?
It's just first time on a Mac, so.
Okay. Yeah. If you would write your name down, and I will try to sign up again, just put it down here. And what I will do is I will talk to the people in the office and see what they say. Okay? If you have a student ID, that would be great. And I'll tell them that you tried to enroll and say it's full. And even when you say, well, then put me on the wait list.
Well, she tried to log in, student ID.
Maybe if you go into the office itself, you might have to stand in line a bit and have them do it and just say, put me on the waiting list, because then I can add you to put on the wait list. Oh, shoot. Probably over